We're ready to go for the lightning round. Now, I had no idea what a lightning round was until I saw it in operation yesterday. And what I learned from that was that this is essentially a game show. And so I'm your game show host. I'm going to fire quick questions to begin with at the audience, at our panelists, just to get them warmed up. But then, and here's the thing, I'm going to be looking to the audience. So get primed, please, with short questions which can elicit short answers from the panelists. And we have about 35, 40 minutes to cover anything that we haven't yet covered over the last 2 days, or even to go back over issues again that you didn't think were fully explored. So I don't think I need to spend a great deal of time on introductions, because this panel is now Betsy, Fischer, Bettina, Inclán, Steve McMahon, and Kiki, McLean, I think are all by now well known to all of us. But thank you all very much for coming on the show this evening. I want to start with I've been hearing during the last couple of days that this meeting and what extraordinary fun and privilege, by the way, this is for us to have hosted you all here these last 2 days. I can't tell you how special and extraordinary this has been in so many ways. But I gather that you've been meeting together for many years. I don't know whether you met in 1919, but if you did. If you met in 1919,
I look pretty good for it, don't you?
We'd all now been talking about the expectation of a Wilson v. Teddy Roosevelt race in 1920. Obviously, that didn't come to pass because medical episodes intervened. Now, far be it from me to tempt fate here, but my question is, if a medical incident intervenes and Joe Biden is not the Democratic candidate as we expect him to be, my question to the panel is, who will be, and does this help or hurt Donald Trump? Kiki.
Our Vice President, Kamala Harris, will be the Democratic nominee for president, and it will not help Donald Trump, and she'll be a remarkable representative of the Democratic Party. She's been elected statewide in the state of California multiple occasions. Millions of Americans have voted for her, and she'll do well.
Steve.
I agree with Kiki. I mean, I think Kamala Harris has not gotten a fair shake from the media, frankly, from a lot of Democrats even, and she's much more capable than people realize.
Bettina?
I agree. I think most likely will be the vice president. I do think that it is a challenge when you're the vice president to push an agenda, and I think it's going to be a challenge for her to say a little bit more of like what she's actually accomplished. So it's not going to be easy. I think it'll be a competitive race, and Trump will be able to talk about his accomplishments. And VP Harris, while very impressive, as a former California citizen myself, I think it'll be a challenge for her.
And Betsy.
Well, I think some of it depends on timing, if something should happen. I think the less time there is, are you talking about before the actual election?
Yeah, let's imagine between now and January.
Happens,
yeah.
The closer we are to the election, I think there probably would be a default to her, to Kamala Harris. Something that happens sooner than that, I think it could be a situation where it would be up for grabs. We were talking today, too. I mean, what happens if for some reason a President Biden can't serve out his full term? What does that look like for 2028, which is, I think, a little bit more interesting parlor game, because what happens, if we do have a President Harris who wants to run again in 2028, we have this incredible field of up-and-coming, in their own right, very qualified candidates, the Gretchen Whitmers, the Wes Moores, these are names that you're going to, if you follow U.S. politics, you're going to hear a lot about. What does that mean for their opportunity to maybe run in 2028?
What happens if Donald Trump has a medical emergency?
That was going to be my next question.
I just didn't want to miss
Equal
out
opportunity
on the
karma. Equal opportunity
and
karma.
by the way, all that wonderful talent you're talking about would be Democratic governors. Sorry,
yes, exactly.
Tim Scott, Democratic governors making my play.
Yeah.
Do you want to take that question then, Kiki? What
Trump.
What
Well,
happens if-
and I think timing has something to say.
Yeah.
Is there a running mate partner? How far are you into it? Is it Tim Scott's chance to move the lane in? I'm right there. You're paying for drinks tonight? Yeah. It actually, timing really matters on that one, right? Timing really matters on that one in the nominating process.
And the flip side of the question, Kiki, is then what does it do for Biden? And specifically, anybody else other than Trump is likely to be considerably younger. Does that bring the age question back on the agenda even more strongly?
I think it still matters who it is on that side. The President Biden has an extraordinary record of accomplishment. And we have a long way to go until this general election. And as you've heard from all the pollsters and all the veteran strategists here, what we say today is a long way from what we would say 9 months from now.
Bettina.
Everyone's correct that timing matters. So for argument's sake, let's say it happens the next 2 to 3 months. I would say it would probably be Nikki Haley. And just given where she is right now in the polls and what people are thinking, and I think that we've talked a lot in these last 2 days, that given the scenario on the international scale, Nikki Haley's standing in her VC, I think positions her best. And, President Biden has an incredible record, great statesman, but perception is reality. And there is a perception out there that maybe it's time for, to move on. And I think Nikki Haley, that two different, very different people. Nikki Haley is a young, I guess, especially compared to President Biden, she's young, she's a governor, she's an ambassador, she's also a minority woman, would make history on so many different levels. And just as a Republican who myself is a minority, I'm really proud of the diversity of the Republican candidates. It's lots of different backgrounds, lots of different types of people that represent, I think, the future of the party and where we're going.
Steve, same question.
Well, it's really hard to discount Tim Scott. I mean, I think we have to start there.
Where's Colin?
Now, there's a little Scott mania right here in the room.
It's a shame Bettina has to buy her own drinks tonight.
I love Tim Scott. I'm just going to say that.
So, I mean, look for Tim Scott coming on strong late.
Yeah.
But if it's not Tim Scott, and let's just hypothetically say that it wasn't Tim Scott, I think Bettina's right. I think Nikki Haley would be a likely nominee, and I think she would be a strong nominee for all the reasons that Bettina talked about. I think it would be a very, very difficult and very different race for President Biden for all the reasons that Bettina just mentioned. Now, I do think that, experience is going to matter more against her than it would against Donald Trump, and he's obviously got an advantage there. But it would be a tougher race, I think, and it would be a much different race.
Betsy?
Yeah, I agree on the Nikki Haley front in terms of, if something was sooner rather than later. But I mean, not to focus too much on someone's demise, but I mean, I do think that, interestingly enough, there would be when you look at the Republican Party, a lot of people who would like to see Donald Trump exit stage left. And what becomes of the Republican Party without Trump at the top of it is a really interesting thought experiment. If we keep talking about maybe if he loses, if he goes to trial, if he's convicted, all those things, Trump still exists. But what if he is off the stage? Then what happens to the party?
Can I add one thing to think about this? And I don't know this to be true, but it's something to think about. All the things you've said about a Nikki Haley candidacy would absolutely be in play. But I also wonder if the contours of the race wouldn't just change dramatically in terms of, to Steve's point, credentials would actually matter, including Biden's.
Right, of course.
Not just the personality. So it really becomes a more traditional race. And in some ways, his age may not matter as much. In some ways,
I don't know. I think when you have a Biden versus Nikki Haley, I mean
I'm not saying it doesn't matter,
Yeah.
but I say it doesn't matter as much because some of the more traditional qualities of a presidency might matter more. Just an idea.
That would be the hope.
Warning to the audience that I'm going to be looking for questions.
By the way, that was lightning.
In about a minute and a half. So if you have questions, you can already start indicating them to me by raising your hand. So I'll know you're there. But another question from me. Let's abandon that hypothetical and let's now think about a world in which it is a Trump-Biden race next year. And let's imagine that Trump loses. Question, what percentage of the American population accept that he lost legitimately in this scenario?
Oh, wait, we have to like word that carefully. Try that again.
How many Americans will accept that Trump loses if Trump loses?
Well, a lot
Or,
of it,
sorry, I phrased it the other way around. How many will not accept
Does
that
Trump,
has lost?
does
Yeah,
Trump
there's the
admit
question-
that he
yeah,
lost?
depends on
Does he-
Well, you can incorporate that into your answer if you like, as a factor.
I would say a large majority of the people that would have voted for him if he refuses to concede again would be convinced again that he didn't actually lose. The diehard Trump fans, the MAGA crowd, right?
You have to understand how many actually people perform to vote to understand.
So will it be the same as 2020? Will it be better or will it be worse?
It'll be worse.
Oh, yeah, worse.
Yeah.
But the percentage will be worse, I think.
I think we're assuming a lot of hypotheticals. I think it depends a lot, like what are the results of the race? How many states are at play? Like there's so much there. And this question, I think, is unfair and it's overly complicated. No, I think it's a good question, but I think it comes with a lot of baggage. Look, I am a former Trump appointee. When I joined the administration, multiple of my Democrat friends told me, why are you going to go work for the illegitimate president? Clinton, there was multiple people that said he was illegitimate president. I get it. It's super complicated.
Sorry, I have to, Bettina, that's not the same, right? So
I'm-
Trump lost the popular vote, obviously, but he won legitimately in the Electoral College. So Democrats, in that sense, saying he's not a legitimate president because the system is broken.
But
because
that is
allowed
not
for an
what I'm
Electoral College
addressing. I'm
victory.
addressing-
That's not the same as the way Republicans.
That is
some
not
Republicans
that is not what I'm
responded to
trying to address. I'm trying to address that it's a complicated subject for both sides, and there's a lot of emotion that come with it. And what is going to be the deciding factor is the actual numbers. What is how close the race is, and how many states are up for grabs.
I hear what Bettina's saying and what Todd said. If it's a race like last time and has been predicted, Anzo, I believe yesterday said it will be super tight. If it's a race that comes within, 15,000 in Wisconsin, 10,000 in Arizona, and the margin of errors of a machine that goes down in one state so that people feel like, and there will always be error. There's human error in counting ballots that are not conspiratorial and not someone trying to steal a race. I would say to you that if it is, let's say the numbers were the same as they were last. I believe the percentage of Trump supporters who believe the election is stolen will go up because the level of this is not a proper word, aggrievedness. Please, Eugene, don't. But y'all know what I mean when I say that, right? Aggrievedness will go up because it's happened a second time, okay? If the win is closer to a 4 to 5 point race, maybe even a 3 to 4 to 5 point race, it becomes much clearer, much earlier if we're not sitting up with ballot counting and cameras 3 to 4 days out and protesters where emotions run higher. To Bettina's point, the number goes down.
but I think that the observation that was that was made earlier, depending upon how Trump reacts. So if Trump says it was stolen, there's going to be a lot of people who believe him, and they may behave in a way that's really not.
Maybe the question is how many people here believe Trump will lose and not say the race is stolen?
There's a
I think
question from.
he'll say it was rigged and stolen. And
I want to bring the audience in here. There's a
Yeah, so
question
on
from
this
Theo.
question, if Trump does lose,
Yeah.
to what extent do you think there might be another January 6th sort of event? Because obviously as a Brit watching that from abroad, it was deeply shocking. If you think that more people will think the election is stolen next time, to what extent
I
will
think that was the
potentially happen
fear
again?
of a lot of people on election night. I don't think, and I think maybe we talked about this in a previous panel, that some of the fear when you think about political violence was over the concern about the immediate days after the election, not necessarily when the electoral the votes were certified in Congress. And so I think the tensions of an election night sort of atmosphere, I think there definitely could be violence. I think one of the unique components too when we think about a confluence of issues that we've talked about and the role of the media. And we talked about this distrust that voters and in particular Republicans have in the media. Yet strangely enough in our system, and Doug held up the Florida, that was election night. We have the media are the folks that call an election in this country. They are the ones that put up the projection, George W. Bush is president. Oh, no, it's not. And so, who are you relying on? There is no one overseer of an election at a very broad sense, a federal election, that will declare a winner. And so, and look, you saw this happen with Fox in Arizona, changing calls and the pressures that were brought to bear on whether Fox was going to call a particular state. I mean, we have 4 or 5 networks in the United States. Each of them has an army, and believe me, this used to be my job, being in part of that army of people who are looking at polls, looking at modeling, making projections, and then coming out and sort of declaring a winner. And when you have that and you have this distrust in the media, I think it just can ignite a fire.
But wasn't it great when Fox called Arizona? I mean, come on, right?
Exactly.
It just totally spoiled Donald Trump's plan to go
I
down and declare himself the winner of the election because Fox News said, not so fast, buddy.
I don't think you can predict that right now. There are a lot of things that go into that. Number one, to Todd's point, what happens on the election? What kind of election night is that? Number two, what do the presidential candidates say and do? We have a lot of examples in America, not just an election. We have a lot of examples around what's happened in civil rights and arrests and murders. We've seen things where we've had explosive violence on sports. We've seen nights where we've seen civil rights leaders stand up and say, please don't protest. Go home and keep your family safe tonight. Let us work this out in the courts. And calm has been brought to bear. We also may see a different reaction in the follow-on to the investigation and, frankly, the prosecution of people who brought violence to the Capitol that may hopefully have the kind of impact we would hope that says, please don't bring guns into the Capitol and hurt other human beings. So I don't think we want to predict that right now. I'd like to believe in the better nature of our angels as the American people to honor the election, and it may not be election night. So let's see what our leaders do, let's see what our fellow citizens do, and let's see where this election ends up.
Conscious there are a lot of people wanting to come in here, and I'm trying to give priorities for students. Laura.
So much for lightning.
Thank you so much for riveting 2 days. I have a question about diversity in the Republican Party. So it's been really interesting to me to hear about the optimism of some Republicans on the panel saying that they see the future of Republican candidates and they see diversity and they see this as really optimistic. But if I look at the people running for House Speaker right now, I don't really see diversity. And the question about, okay, if it's not Trump, a lot of you said Nikki Haley, but how do we understand what was Trump's base voting for a female, even thinking about misogyny and its role in 2016 and Hillary Clinton's defeat? So I'm just wondering, and when we talked about Romney in the previous panel as well, do you see after Trump the GOP turning toward trying to return to the sort of 2012 Romney autopsy, this idea of, okay, we want to broaden our tent, we want to bring in more diverse voices? Do you see, and how much of a bigger lurch would that be for the Republican Party after Trump?
Wow, impressive on the autopsy. I love that.
Bettina.
As someone who participated in the 2012 autopsy, it's a heavy question. I think there's a lot to dissect there. Number one, why you see a handful of people in the speaker race? Because it's a thankless job. It is a difficult job, and even if I were there, I would not want that job. I think it's very difficult, and there's many people that have already discussed the difficulties, but I do not think that it is reflective of where the party is. If you look at the members of Congress now, they're much more diverse of who they make up in the Republican Party than before. When I was in the National Republican Congressional Committee, I was part of an effort to elect more women to run for office. So and this was like 10 years ago. So there has been a constant effort. Trump in this last election, the gender why am I forgetting the words? But the difference between gender is closed.
gender gap.
The gender gap. Thank you, Kiki. She's so fantastic.
here to
The gender gap closed in this last election. And I think, and I said this yesterday, I don't believe in like a woman vote or Hispanic vote. I think it depends so much. You know, married women vote differently than single women. Women in the suburbs vote different from the women in urban areas. But there is a lot of diversity. Could there be more? Absolutely. But I'm proud of where the party is moving. I think that our chairwoman on the Republican side, Daniels Romney, has done an incredible job, or Romney McDaniels, has been doing a wonderful job to continue those efforts. And I think you'll continue to see women in all levels. I also think the Republicans have done a really good job in the governor's races, in electing strong female governors. And we've done an incredible job. Good job, Sarah. So I think there's a lot, and saying just this one section and making that reflective of the entire party is not fair.
But do any of the Republicans who are here in the room believe that Mitt Romney could get nominated in the Republican Party today?
No.
So I think that's your answer about whether the party would actually go back to the old days of Mitt Romney, and wasn't it lovely? It's a Trump party, and it's going to be a Trump party probably for a really long time.
Georgia Dunn at the back there has a question.
Sorry, I wanted to ask a question about, so we heard in the first panel that the 4 indictments against Trump might fall into sort of background noise given how expensive eggs are under Joe Biden. And I just wanted to ask if the panel agreed with that sentiment, if there's not a kind of sense that in the US, rational people who maybe voted for Trump before are less likely to do so now, given you know, how much evidence there is now against him. And then to kind of follow that, who the panel would rather have if the crisis in the Middle East plays out for several years, who we would rather have in charge in that case. Yeah, thank you.
Can I go first on this?
Go ahead.
I want to compliment what Sarah laid out earlier on the case against Biden. Don't shoot me. Because what she said was factually correct, all right? The president and the vice president are in a tough position, right? These are the facts. And she said it. There's a lot of reasons that the gas prices in the U.S. are up. It's not Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's fault, but they're up. The argument is, where would they be if they were not in office and had not taken the positions they had? That's a really tough campaign message, right? In fact, the U.S. is more, exactly, the U.S. is more stable right now and has reined in a great deal of the chaos that we would have been in had there been another Trump term. But that's a hard political message to follow through. So Sarah was right. That is a great, great political challenge. Now, the flip side of that is, I frequently talk about, I have an imaginary friend. Her name is Sally. She's a single mom. She's a paralegal at a law firm. She gets up at 5 o'clock in the morning because that's when she can start a load of laundry, make lunches, take her 2 kids to pre-care because she has to be at the law firm by 8:15. She gets a half an hour at lunch. She stops at the pharmacy and picks up medication for her mother. She's off by 5:15. She has to pick up the kids at 5:30 because if she's late, it's a $25 late charge. She stops by her mom's at 6 o'clock to drop off the medicine, gets home by 6:45, feeds her kids, has them at the kitchen table at 7:15, loads the dishwasher, moves that laundry, puts them in the bed in the bathtub by 7:45, has them at bed at 8:30, right? Then she goes in and cleans up the kitchen, right? Pays 3 bills, eats a quick bite of dinner by herself at 10 o'clock. She hasn't read the New York Times to understand the 4 indictments, right? But she knows where her budget is, okay? And while intellectually, I would love for her to understand those indictments and why he is not qualified to be president of the United States, she may pick up a little bit on the radio driving to work, right? So that's one of the challenges. It doesn't mean Sally's a bad person because she can't figure that out, because she has the brain power to figure it out. It's what she's up against in life, and that is what part of our job is, to help make those choices clear. So that's what we're up against, I think. And I think many millions of Americans have made that choice, and I think they will make that choice again this year.
Just keep rolling through questions, or you want?
Yeah,
Sorry.
we can keep.
I went
Did,
too long.
did you have a question? Yes, there.
how difficult do you think it will be we haven't really talked about Senate campaigns. There's some Democratic incumbents, obviously, in red states, and how difficult do you think they will find it to achieve the level of ticket splitting needed for their re-election campaign?
There are 34 Senate seats up in 2024, and 23, I think, are held by Democrats or independents aligned with the Democrats. Is there a scenario in which the Democrats hold the Senate? I mean, can a Democratic person here be that optimistic?
So Joe Biden likes to say, "Don't compare me to the Almighty, compare me to the alternative." And what you have, there are a couple of Democratic seats, Joe Manchin's in particular, which are plus 40 for the Republicans in a presidential year. That's a hard seat to hold. If anybody can hold it, Joe Manchin can, because he's won there statewide many times, but that's a hard one. In Montana, you would think that's a really hard one too, because it's probably plus 20 for the Republicans. But John Tester, the Democrat out there, is currently ahead by 4. So it depends a lot on who the Republicans nominate. The truth is, many people thought that they were going to take the Senate last time, but they nominated candidates who couldn't win. And so, given the way the party on the Republican side has become sort of a cult of Trump, there's a pretty decent likelihood that they'll do the same thing again. And I think the Senate could very easily flip, but I also think it could very easily be held if we have the right candidates and the Republicans do what they did in 2022.
Anyone else on the Senate? No?
I think it all depends on the candidates.
Yeah.
Like,
The top of the ticket is really important.
yeah, but I think it depends on the candidates, and it's hard to make predictions if you don't know what the actual election is going to be.
Dan?
Those states will split tickets, by the way. The two
have.
that-
They
I
have.
mean,
Yeah.
Steve raises two
Yeah.
states that will split
Yeah,
tickets.
so
to
you
your question.
specifically asked about ticket splitting, but
Yeah.
I think Steve answered
Yep.
that ticket split. Dan?
So my question picks up on a direction we went earlier. I'm not going to take it to its level of absurdity and sort of say who are candidates in 2036, but it's obviously Joe Biden, the names we've used repeatedly, Joe Biden, Donald Trump, they're not going to be around, constitutionally, whatever. Where does we talked a bit about the Republican Party, where does the Democratic Party, are we seeing enduring shifts at a sort of party level? I'm sort of social sciencing this, but sort of where does the panel think the parties are going? And you've picked up on this a bit for the Republican Party, but...
I would tell you, and again, Sarah and I love governors, there is a tremendous pipeline of governing talent in the governor's houses of the Democratic Party. And they are young, and they are vibrant, and they are innovative in their public policy toward both social policy and economic policy. And in the year 2036, I suspect several of them will have run for president. Some may have been in the White House or getting ready to be in the White House. And I don't mean 1 or 2, I mean half a dozen on my side, on our side, right? Gretchen Whitmer, Josh Shapiro, Wes Moore, Katie Hobb. I mean, I can name Gavin Newsom. I mean,
Former Governor Gina Raimondo.
I mean, there are a lot of them who aren't just the next 2 cycles, but really will be on the main stage for the next 4 to 5 cycles, right?
Yeah, I mean, and perhaps as early as next cycle. I mean,
Yes.
the Kamala Harris question is interesting, and
Yeah.
she's earned the right to be the nominee.
Correct.
But I'm not sure that every single Democrat who also wants to be president
They're not
will
gonna-
honor that. So it's going to be, she deserves it, she's earned it, but she may not get it without a fight. Who was it who said yesterday, they don't give this to you, you have to go take it?
Yeah.
And that's going to be probably true in 4 years as well for Democrats.
But in terms of who these folks are making up the party, they have managed these states through COVID. They are managing these states through climate. This is a new generation of leaders dealing with new issues and challenges.
I think the question is probably about the Democratic Party going to reflect a DSA-style socialism that you see active for folks in their 20s and 30s. The age gap on the Palestinian-Israeli question is profound. Or is the Democratic Party, like here in England, going to go back to being New Labour once again, where somebody can yank them back to the middle? I mean, I think that's what the issue is, like, what are Democrats going to be once Trump leaves the stage? Are they going to be effectively a left-wing party that like Bernie wanted to be, or is Clintonism and Obamaism sort of?
Well, I mean, I think Kiki and
pragmatists.
bringing her
They're
DLC
managists.
roots to bear, right? I mean, the people that, we just outlined there in terms of the governors in the pipeline, I would say are certainly very middle of the road,
They're pragmatists.
centrist,
A
pragmatist,
new
doers, of their generation. And so, even looking at, leadership in Congress, you don't see sort of the far left in leadership positions either.
And
also depends if the base of the Democratic Party continues to be older black people. If the base of the Democratic Party continues to be older black people who are more pragmatic, pretty moderate on most issues, then the people that you just find out are going to be successful. It's not going to be an AOC or those kind of folks because they're just not that interested in those in far left policies, and that's why Vice President Harris is probably poised in 2028 to take the nomination. Because when you poll all of these folks, she polls better with black people than any of them. And so if the base of the Democratic Party changes to a more white, young, liberal, which is the loudest part of the Democratic Party right now, then the switch happens. But if it continues to be older black
Yeah, and do they vote is the thing. Is we always talk about, younger people being very active and on doing the protests, but do they actually go to the polls and vote? And the answer is not at anywhere the rates that older Americans do.
I want to bring in Ben, a question from Ben at the back row there.
Yeah, I wanted to ask something about the role of foreign policy in the upcoming election and how that relates to generational differences between Republican and Democratic voters, specifically on the Israel-Palestine issue that's come up, that's coming back into the United States, attacks on a rabbi in Detroit. I wanted to ask, how is that going to play out in this upcoming election, especially given Biden's track record in Afghanistan and all of that?
Well, it's a really good question. I think part of it will depend upon how things develop in the Middle East because, right now you have a situation that is what it is. I think there are a lot of people who are really worried about escalation and it becoming a three-front war. And so I don't know how that plays out. I fear that it doesn't play out well. And in terms of like how it affects the electorate, Michigan is a state where there is a fairly significant Arab vote, and that's going to be a battleground state like it always is. So the dynamics are probably different state to state, but Michigan is a state that I would watch. But it also depends, to a large degree on what happens and how people feel about what's happening and whether it looks like a measured and reasonable response on the part of the Israelis, or whether it looks like something else, and what happens with all the groups and countries that surround Israel. I mean, it's a tinderbox, obviously, and I can't predict how the tinderbox is going to look in 3 months or 6 months.
I'm going to keep the questions rolling in the spirit of the lightning round. So, gentlemen there.
If I turn it on, there it goes. So thank you so much. I'm not usually a very eager question asker, so I don't know what you've done to me over the last 2 days, but thank you, I think. I taught in Gainesville for 5 years before I made my way over here, and Palm Beach County's home, 2 places that Mr. Harris skipped over in his tour of the Sunshine State a few minutes ago. But I do, for the sake of bringing a few threads together here, I would like to go back to Florida, if we could, just for a minute. I think the future directions question looms large in Florida. And when I heard what I heard from the previous panel, I don't know that I'm leaving here any more confident than I walked in. There is a profound sense of abandonment, I think, amongst people who had really high hopes in the 2018 campaign, which DeSantis won by, a tooth hair. And I'm not sure that there's a lot of optimism moving forward after the Crist campaign. So if Florida is being sought off into the Caribbean, what realistically on the ground can people expect in terms of mobilization and a sense of belonging within the Democratic Party? Because it is cultural. And when you talk about grievance culture and politicians trading on what has become grievance politics, I do think Florida's ground zero there. And the difference between maybe, if you can say the Rust Belt anymore, the Rust Belt in a place like Florida, is that you have somebody articulating that grievance and actually activating it, turning it into policy. And so that's what I think concerns a lot of people in Florida. And I'm wondering, if the Democrats are really just going to sort of wash their hands of it and focus on other places that they think are more competitive.
I want to make sure I understand. You were optimistic in 2018 about what?
Because it was a purple state.
About Gillum's chances, yeah.
Oh, Gil, for Andrew. Okay, sorry. I just
As
wanted
a
to make sure I
representative of
understood.
the
I want to make
greater
sure I
party
understood. You were
apparatus.
optimistic about who and what. Okay. Got it. Sorry.
Oh, so
Florida, the map.
as a resident of Florida, Lee County, I actually am a little bit less pessimistic about Florida than the group that was up here a little while ago. And I also believe that Florida is more competitive at the statewide level for the down ballot, non-presidential candidates than it looks for a presidential candidate. And you know, Andrew Gillum did get very close, and you're right. DeSantis won by just a tiny little bit. My sense when we're down there is that people kind of feel like DeSantis has kind of jumped the shark. And the Disney fight, for instance, which looked like it was going really well for him, doesn't really look like it's going so well for him right now. And he's kind of overreached and become a little too Trumpian for a lot of people's taste. It also is going to depend upon who the Democrats nominate, because Charlie Crist, I mean, God love him, was not a very good candidate. And he wasn't really remembered as being a really great governor. So if you know, John said earlier, if we could find a billionaire who served in the military who would run against Rick Scott, he'd have a great shot. That same candidate and that candidate profile would have a really good shot as a Democratic gubernatorial candidate in Florida right now. I just don't think the Democrats do a very good job recruiting candidates and getting them nominated, and hopefully they can do better. But it's not as far gone as it is on the presidential level. At least that's my view.
It's going to be a challenge that takes a long time to sort itself out, because the Democrat Party in Florida has been decimated. Right. There is no infrastructure anymore.
This is the issue.
It is. Who was the last Democrat governor? Bob Graham.
Well, Charlie Crist.
he was the first.
Well, he wasn't a Democrat then, was he?
No, he's not.
Troublemaker.
Lawton Childs, thank you. And so it's not just a question of like finding the right candidate recruitment. They really have to start over in terms of rebuilding the party.
You have to go with it. As a Texan, I speak from which I know. One of the challenges you have, you can't be optimistic for one cycle. You have to be willing to go the whole road, right? So as a participant in DGA, I not only want to make Sarah and the RGA spend money where they don't need to, just to be mean, but I got to go spend money in states I know I'm not going to win, because I got to turn dirt. I got to plant seeds. I got to get people used to voting as a Democrat again. I got to get people to run for office. I got to build muscle, flex it, and grow it. And that frequently will take probably 4 to 8 cycles before you start clicking and humming. That's a 6 to 10 year in a mid-sized state, right? That's an 8 to 12 year in a big state. So that's really what you have to think about, I think.
No, I agree.
We're getting close to the end here. I can see one question on the back row there.
If we do something stupid like nominate Matt Gaetz for governor.
You should, please do. Steve, can you make that happen?
Huh?
Vote in that primary for Matt Gaetz.
Thanks so much. What's the best case scenario for American democracy and the public's trust in it, and how likely is that to happen?
Betsy, why don't you take that?
Yeah, Betsy, handle that, would you?
Best case for American democracy in terms of what?
The best case scenario in terms of people trusting the process.
Well, it's not British rule again, so don't get any ideas. Can
I ask a version of that question, a more closed version of that question? If you had to recommend one single constitutional change that would improve the quality
abolish
of American
the Electoral
democracy,
College.
what would it be?
I agree with that.
Betsy?
Get rid of the Electoral College.
Abolish the Electoral College. Steve?
That's it.
Yeah.
One man, one person, one vote.
Yeah.
Bettina?
She's not going to say that.
I'm not going to. I don't agree with them. I believe.
Yeah.
No, I'm one of the core things about being a conservative, you believe in what the founders created, and I believe in the system.
Never for anything to evolve from the founders?
They didn't allow us.
Think carefully.
Yes, exactly. There's that.
Carefully.
Yeah.
Be careful.
We can have a full-on conversation on that, because I would.
It's a short one.
So you changed nothing. It's perfection as it is. So
No,
if-
of course, America is not perfection. It's one
But
of
you
the
wouldn't
point-
change the
What would you
Constitution.
change?
So would you? Is there something else you would do legislatively or in any other way that could, in theory, be done in order to improve the quality of American democracy?
To be honest, like I can't think of something right now. I think it's one of those things that one of the challenges we have as society is where there's too many people that are so pessimist and everything is so horrible and negative. And I wish that we as a society come together and think of like the positive things that bring us together instead of thinking all the things that we have against each other. I think it's one of the great things about these forums is that you're forced to talk to people on the other side and you find things that you have in common instead of focusing all the things that you have against each other.
See, I'm going to take it one step further. I love these forums because we talk about what's working, but it's not pessimistic to recognize when something's broken and admit we have to solve it, right? And so the fact of the matter is when we have a lot of people who feel, who used the word on the panels, dispossessed? Todd, was that your word that I thought was it? There was a word somebody used. Was it yours?
Eugene did something like that too. Just doesn't feel right.
It was one of you Republicans who was trying to explain to me why nobody trusted the institutions anymore, and it was a. I'm trying to pay y'all a compliment and tell you I learned something from you, and it was a great word, right? And that's a problem, and so we can't just be all happy-o and cheerio about it, right? Something's not working. And I think it is a great moment of optimism that millions of people still show up to the polls. Kevin Madden has the solution.
No, just real quick, the speed round, like ranked choice voting open primaries as like a
Yeah.
I love both of them.
not a constitutional change, but like a structural change.
Yep. Does everybody know what Kevin's talking about? Ranked choice?
Ranked choice voting. I think that does help women too.
Okay, so
Single
for
transferable
our
vote
viewers,
elections to the Senate in multi-member
for our
seats.
viewers who didn't have a
Want to get that on
microphone,
microphone.
Kevin Madden just recommended ranked choice voting and open primaries. You can Google those things. They're very easy to read about, and they're being experimented with at different levels in American politics.
Yep.
Oh,
Right.
Who sits on the board of the
Well,
National
can I
Popular
also just
Vote?
raise one other quick thing too that I would think about is getting rid of, when we talked about this earlier, partisan political news cable,
Yeah.
the Foxes
Yeah.
and the MSNBCs
That's a
on
different
both
issue.
sides.
I would agree with that.
I'm not so sure
By the
about
way,
But
so
that's not a constitutional.
I don't
one
know-
little-
I don't know about
Final-
managing
final,
media like
final
that.
question,
I'm not
because
for that.
we're really out of time. But you could literally answer this last question in one word.
Okay.
In one word, if you want. Okay. The question is, which previous presidential election is most useful to think about when we're going into this election? Which does this election most remind you of?
2020.
2020, the sequel.
I mean,
Yeah.
you asked.
Yeah. Yeah. And the sequels are never as good, right?
I was gonna version of that question is 1892 or 1872. Which of those two? So a kind of.
I'm going to be honest with you and tell you I have no idea what you're talking about. They won't even tell you that.
So we've got 2020. Any others that you're getting vibes from past elections?
I would like to say it would be the election following Watergate, but I don't think that all of America is in the same place about wanting to clean it up.
Yeah. I mean, maybe 2016, because I think Trump is such an anomaly and he's such an unpredictable person that he just, no other election year, because he's not unlike any other candidate. He defies all norms. And so you really have to look at other races where he's run, I think.
We are 5 stations past normal.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
So just one quick thing, though, because we talk about democracy and it's failing and all that. Here's one positive note maybe to end this on, and that is
Bettina.
2022.
Optimist.
In 2022, there were elections all across the country, and there weren't people afterwards saying the election was rigged. There weren't people afterwards who had lost saying, except for Carrie Lake, who's a crazy person. But it generally didn't happen. People accepted the results of the election, including the candidates who lost, who gave gracious concession speeches, as used to be the tradition in democratic politics in America, democracy in America, for many, many generations. So that was a moment where I actually got some faith back that it's possible to do this again and to do it without acrimony. I think 2024, because of Trump, is probably going to be filled with acrimony, but hopefully around the country in races that don't have, that where it's not the presidential, it's not Donald Trump, people will kind of act more like 2022 and not like 20.
That is a wonderful note to end on.
Yay to optimism.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you once again, Adam, for hosting us.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Thank you, Adam. And I think let me say, I know we've been talking to each other. We are extremely impressed with the students here. I don't want to make any invidious comparisons to other institutions we're affiliated with, but this has been a great, great crowd. We've so been appreciative for your attention, your thoughtful questions. And I don't know if I can push Adam right now in front of everybody, but why not? We'd really like to come back next year.
We would love it.
So
We would love it.
let's count on it. Thank you all. Have a great evening, and good luck as we approach the next few months.
Oh, no, thank you, honestly.